Alright, all you glorious gamers out there, welcome to the PlayersToo Podcast, the video game podcast for gamers like you, by gamers like you. You can find PlayersToo on all the social media, that's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayersToo.com, that's PlayerStoo.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, that really helps us out. It does a huge amount for the exposure of the show. And while you're over there, if you could leave us a little review as well, again, it just helps us out even more and you would be an absolute legend to us. Alright, and on with the show. My name is Mark Henderson. With me, as always, Mr. Lewis Camley. How's it going, Lewis? We're back!
We are back, yeah. It's good to see you, Mark. It's been a little while now. How you doing?
It has been a little while. Lewis, I was ill. I'm not going to lie. The reason that we couldn't do the recording last week is because I was ill. I went away on holiday, I came back, and immediately was ill. I'm very sorry. We missed 2 weeks in a row, Lewis. That's never happened. That's literally the first time since we started this podcast that we have not recorded for 2 weeks in a row. Absolutely unacceptable, entirely my fault. I apologise to all the listeners and to you, Lewis, but I think we have to move on and I think we have to talk about some goddamn video games because it's been far too long.
It has been far too long, yeah, and there's been plenty of video game stuff going on in that time.
God save me, it's been such a busy 2 weeks. You know, ladies and gentlemen, sometimes when we're doing the notes for this podcast, you are sort of scraping the barrel a little bit to find like really cool news stories to talk about. While we were on holiday, it felt as though all the cool news stories came at once and we weren't talking about any of them, but it was so annoying. But Liz, we need to talk about some video games. Let's crack on, man.
We definitely do. Yeah, well, in the time that you've been away, Mark, in terms of what I've been playing, it's really just been more Bloodborne, so the listeners and yourself haven't missed too much in that regard, unfortunately. I've just been fairly slowly still making my way through my first ever Bloodborne playthrough. I think I'm about halfway through the game now.
Nice one, man.
It's hard to tell. I've been trying not to look too far ahead of myself in any guides, but looking at just the chapter headings on the IGN guide, I think I'm roughly about there. And that's not including any of the DLC content, which I'm still weighing up whether I want to take that on as well.
Liz, you want to take it on, man. Again, it is the best piece of DLC I've ever played. You definitely want to take that on. Seriously, dude, it is so good.
And it's particularly because I did read this, that you can't easily start it after you've beaten the game. Like, I think you basically have to play through a new game plus up to a certain point, so it'd be better to start it before then. Anyway, that's at the back of my mind. As I say, about halfway through, still absolutely loving it. I've still got that horrible tension when I've got free time to play it. I'm sort of sometimes not really in the mood for it because I expect that it's going to be a slog, but then every time I do actually boot it up, it's just really thrilling to play. And I'm now at that point that you've described plenty of times before, when the balance swings a wee bit and you are not as concerned about dying anymore. Like, I've certainly said before that I've passed that threshold of not fearing death, and that happens quite early on and you get into the rhythm of what you're supposed to be doing. But I also don't feel now like I actually am dying all that often, and it's really just when you make a stupid mistake or getting caught in the environment quite a lot of the time, you know, just daft stuff like that kind of catches you out, which is all part of it, and that's not a criticism at all, but it's just, you know, there's very few times where I feel like, oh, I just don't know how to get past this, or I'm really underpowered, or I don't have a strategy for this. And the boss fights that I've had so far have just been absolutely phenomenal.
They're so good.
that is the side of the game that I would normally be much more wary of, and you get there and just working out what they're doing. And I think actually Bloodborne is quite rewarding in that most of the time getting back to a boss fight isn't a challenge at all. Like, you can often actually just run past all the enemies and get back there, which is the thing that I was, you know, quite fearful of going into it, that it would eat a ton of time. So that allows you to actually enjoy those boss encounters and actually think about what you're trying to do with them. And I said to you off air the other day that I've taken to this strategy of I actually quite often stop playing the game of a night once I reach a boss, but I'll usually like give it 1 or 2 tries and not use any blood vials and not use any items or anything else at all, just to kind of get a sense of its pattern and its, you know, its attack patterns and kind of what its weaknesses might be. And then the next time I go and play, I just go in and rattle it. So I've been really enjoying that. Still got miles to go. I'll still be playing it for a few weeks yet because I'm taking it quite slowly, but yeah, it's fantastic. And anyone who's been flirting with the idea of playing it, I highly recommend doing so.
Man, I am so fucking glad you like it. It is such a good game. Honestly, hearing you talk about it makes me think, do I want to go back and play Bloodborne? But I've got so many other things I need to play. But oh man, it's so good. I'm so glad you're enjoying it. You're liking all the right stuff as well, which I'm happy about. I'm glad that you finally got to the stage as well where you're not dying and death isn't this constant, I don't know, fear, like in the moment to moment. You know what I mean? I think that it's always a fear that never really goes away, to be honest, but it's not like a constant endless fear. Do you know what I mean? You're quite comfortable playing the game at this point. You're quite comfortable taking on most of the more standard enemies, we will say. That is where it really comes so good. It comes so good, Liz. Oh man, it's such a fantastic game, and you have so much other good content to come, I've got to say. Oh man,
it does seem like it's entering some weird territory where I am just now, so I'm quite excited for that. And
awesome,
just
man.
Really quickly, the only other thing I've been playing was I've made a start on Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, which I think
totally quite different, you would say.
Yeah, totally just a little bit different. Yeah, I think I've mentioned before as well, but it's been so long. I basically wanted to have some games to play alongside Bloodborne because of those times where it's, you know, midnight before I can actually dedicate any time to gaming, and that's really not the time to try and make a decent run in Bloodborne. So I started up Ratchet and Clank. I've only played it a couple of times. I suspect I'm, I don't know, about a quarter of the way through, not too far in, but I've done a few levels. I've kind of been exploring a bit. There's not much to say. It's good fun. It's just, you know, Pixar, Dayglow, fun entertainment. Not finding it too challenging so far. I'm not really too invested in the story, but the moment-to-moment gameplay is loads of fun, and visually and sonically even, it's really, really incredible. I've been using that new 3D audio boost that the latest PlayStation firmware update has given, so you can actually listen to it through TV speakers, because I don't have the 3D Pulse headset, so you get a wee bit extra from that, and it's been real nice. So I'll just continue my way through that over the next few weeks as well.
Nice one, man. That's really cool. Obviously, when I was playing it, I couldn't do that on my TV, but awesome. Like, it is such a good game. It is such good fun. It is one of the most truly joyous games I've played in a while. Do you know what I mean? And that just the moment to moment is just great fun. It's just great fun from start to end, basically.
Weapons,
do you know what I mean? Yeah, it's such good weapons, man. It's so fucking fun.
So while you've been in your sick bed, what have you been playing, Mark?
Well, Lewis, I've just been continuing with Nier Replicant. To be honest with you, I don't have too much to say about it because I have been away and then I have been ill, so I haven't played a huge amount. But whilst I was away, I played 2 demos, and I think I mentioned that I was going to play them before on the podcast. The first one was Voice of Cards, which I was pleasantly surprised with, I've got to say. This is the game where cards are everything, Lewis. All the things are cards. And it was created by the team behind Nier and Drakengard, actually, and including Yoko Taro in that as well. It has a very, very tabletop RPG feel about it. That is completely by design. The whole game is basically narrated to you, so it's like it's a story being told to you in real time, effectively. It's told by a single voice, very much in the vein of like a DM in Dungeons and Dragons or something like that. Do you know what I mean? Something of that ilk, and again, that's very much by design. The combat system was fairly similar to something like Hearthstone, although admittedly a stripped back version of that, really. I actually thought that the combat was far too easy, so I'm not sure if the balance isn't quite there yet. That's something that I would like to see them bump up a bit, because I genuinely think I lost 2 hit points across all 3 of my characters in the entirety of the demo. So that isn't great, obviously. So I would like to see a difficulty at least, or at least a bump in difficulty. I will say that the game was originally pitched by Yoko Taro as a mobile game, and you can totally tell. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but you can completely tell. And to be honest, I'm not entirely convinced that it wouldn't be better suited to being on Apple Arcade. Honestly, it's currently going for 25 quid on PlayStation, on Steam, and on Switch. It is not coming to Xbox, at least at launch, which I actually think is a real shame, because this would be a really, really good Games Pass game as far as I'm concerned. Like, I think that it would be really well suited to something like that. But overall, like, I did like it. I really did. I'll maybe have to check out reviews to see if I am going to go back to it. It will be very interesting to see how the sort of wider gaming industry thinks about it. But I was intrigued, we will say that much.
Nice one, sounds good. Worth checking out, I think.
Definitely, man. I mean, this is why demos are great, and we always harp on about how great demos are, is for precisely this. You just get to try out things that you wouldn't maybe otherwise be willing to pay 25 quid for, frankly, when it launches, you know what I mean? So yeah, it was definitely worth it for me. The demo wasn't all that long, to be honest with you, but when it ended, I was disappointed and I wanted to keep on playing, and I think that in and of itself is probably telling. I also played, Lewis, the Triangle Strategy demo as well. This is the next HD 2D quotes game from Square Enix after Octopath Traveler. It looks very, very similar to that in terms of its art style. Octopath Traveler was a turn-based, menu-driven RPG, very much in the vein of the original Final Fantasy games, whereas Triangle Strategy is much more of a tactical RPG, very much in line with what Fire Emblem is, for example. The game very much seems to be split into 3 phases. There is a diplomacy section where you effectively make the big game-changing decisions. There's an exploration section, which basically seems to be gathering intel for the diplomacy, or at least it was in the demo. And then there's the combat section, which is very similar to Fire Emblem. But that is no bad thing. That is no bad thing at all for me. I very much enjoyed the combat in that game, although there is no permadeath, which is less stress-inducing, I will say that. Although I did see from some of the feedback that they were going to be changing the difficulty, or that they'd introduced an easy and a hard mode. I don't know if that means that the mode I was playing in the demo was normal, but it was like pretty challenging, and they say in it, this is going to be pretty challenging. And I actually thought that the combat balance, certainly in comparison to Voice of Cards, was like pretty good. Like, it was a challenging game, but you could definitely get through it, sort of thing. In terms of story, I would say that that is probably the biggest failing of Octopath. You know what I mean? It was very much like 8 stories that didn't really intertwine or whatever. They were just 8 stories that happened in this world. In fact, I'm going to draw a comparison to Lord of the Rings list, and maybe you can help me out here. Is it the Silmarillion that is like the collection of stories from the world of Lord of the Rings? Is that correct?
Yeah, it's like set long before the Lord of the Rings, but yeah, it's all stories from within Middle-earth, yeah.
Exactly, yeah, that's sort of what I'm getting at. Right, so Octopath is like that, whereas Triangle Strategy is like the Lord of the Rings trilogy. There is loads of characters, there's loads of interwoven relationships, there is loads of factions, there's a lot happening, do you know what I mean, in the story? Yep. And to be honest with you, I'm sort of there for it. It very much sort of reminds me of, well, Lord of the Rings, to be honest with you, and a little bit sort of Game of Thrones, although you do seem to be just following like one set of players, although I don't know if that's true throughout the entire game. It was certainly true for the demo, but yeah, it's amazing that they've went in such a totally different direction with it, and it's almost the total opposite to Octopath Traveler, where there seems to be this incredibly rich world with loads of characters, loads of different plates spinning basically. But I was there for it, man. Like, it definitely felt like a much broader story from that perspective. And if anyone is a fan of like XCOM or games like that, Gears Tactics, stuff like that, I would say give this a go, because as I was saying to you off air, by the end of this demo you will know whether or not you like this game, basically, because you're either into it or you aren't, do you know what I mean? And I think that is a good time to use the demo, do you know what I mean? I think that is where demos really come into their own, because they could either save you money or they could really highlight a game to you that you might not otherwise have bought, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I will check this out for sure. I feel like I've even installed that demo before, you know, and just not got around to playing it. So, and a lot of what you've said there, actually, like the story world and definitely the art style, I think is really impressive. From, you know, I like that about Octopath as well, even though I never played it properly. So yeah, I think I'll be checking this out at some point. And like you say, if it's about an hour or so and it tells me whether or not I should spend my money on it, then it's done its job. Yeah, it's a good length of demo as well. I would say that Voice of Cards felt a little bit short, whereas this felt like, oh man, I can't believe I'm getting to play so much of this game just for free, you know, and it was pretty good. I very much enjoyed it. I'll definitely be checking this game out when it releases. But Lewis, I think it is time for the news. Alright, Lewis, news item number 1. The Nintendo Switch Online expansion pricing has been announced, very weirdly, at the end of an Animal Crossing New Horizon Direct, which is a very Nintendo way of going about these things. It was announced that the Animal Crossing Happy Home Paradise DLC would also be included in the expansion pass, but can be bought for £23 or $25, and is coming on November the 5th. However, this is really not what we want to be talking about here. The real story is that the expansion pricing has been announced, and god damn it, people lost their fucking minds over it, Lewis, didn't they? That's what the internet does.
That certainly is. Oh my god. Right, so the pricing is now $34.99 here in the UK, €40 and $50 for a 12-month individual membership. That is up from £18 here in the UK, €20 or $20. That's for not including the expansion pass, basically. which does seem like a pretty big jump in price from £18 list to £35. However, I will remind everyone that is still cheaper than PlayStation, which for PlayStation Plus is £50 per year, and for Xbox Gold it is £72 per year, and that's paying like £18 every quarter. Obviously, a lot of people are getting Xbox Gold with their Games Pass subscription these days as well, but still significantly less than both of them. And while both of them definitely offer more robust online services, I will say, I mean, you're still getting online multiplayer from Nintendo, you're still getting your cloud storage, and now you're also getting access to probably the best library of retro games on any console, you know what I mean? So I'm not claiming that it's great value, Lewis. Certainly not, but I'm sort of fine with the pricing. I actually am pleasantly surprised about it, because in my head the figure I had was that it was going to be £40 per month. So in my head it's £5 cheaper than I thought. I also think that for those people out there that obviously don't want it, that think that this is a bad deal, like, you don't have to get it. That ludicrously cheap £18 a month is still there for you. No one is demanding that you pay for this, do you know what I mean? I'm genuinely interested to know what your thoughts on this are, because you, Lewis, don't have Nintendo Switch Online just now, even at the cheaper price. So I'm interested to know what you think of this, basically.
Yeah, I'm sort of mixed on it all, if I'm honest, which is probably not the hot take you were hoping for. But,
that's fair, man. I think a lot of people are probably like that, to be honest.
I can totally understand, or I can see why people are getting mad about it, because it is, on paper, it is a big price hike, and ultimately the service itself isn't all that great. And you can make comparisons to PlayStation Plus or Xbox Live, but, you know, their online services are pretty robust, and with something like PlayStation Plus, you're getting usually 3 games, often fairly new games, a month, and you're getting, at least on PlayStation 5, you're getting access to the PS Plus collection and things like that. Elements of that are echoed by what Nintendo does, but by all accounts, and as you say, I'm not a subscriber, but by all accounts, the actual online play elements aren't the best. It's still lacking a lot of features like that bizarre need to use a phone app to do voice chat and stuff like that.
Yeah, but that is, to be fair, a failing of the hardware, not a failing of the service. Although,
totally.
Yes, obviously it's not great. Yes.
Yeah, and so but you're still paying extra for that. And then there's kind of additional things that I'm a little bit uncomfortable with, like predominantly the fact that one of the flagship games coming to this new expansion pack being like Mario 64, we've already paid for that in the last like year and a half.
Yeah,
and we paid kind of full price for it, and you know, they did that whole bullshit removing it from sale after a certain amount of time. I mean, there's just things that Nintendo do that don't sit very comfortably, I think, and it makes it quite hard to be like a total champion for this service. But on the flip side, it is a bunch of really good games that are being added to this service. It is not an astronomical sum of money. I mean, to go up to £35 a year, if it's, you know, roughly around that, it's still £2 or £3 a month. I mean, I know you can't actually pay it that way, which is, I've heard American commentators say like $50 spread across a year isn't so bad, but paying $50 in one go is essentially the cost of a game, and that's what you're weighing it up against. And I think partly the reason that I'm not a subscriber just now is that I don't want to pay for something that I'm not certain I'm going to play, and I'm not certain that I'll ever play those games as much as I might want to. So probably when the point came where I was like, I am about to play Mario 64 or Majora's Mask or whatever, I would subscribe then. I wouldn't just subscribe to it permanently at the moment, you know, but that's just me. That's more about the fact that I won't play games online as well, so...
Yeah, I think for you that makes a lot of sense, to be completely honest. But it's interesting that you bring up the free games that you would get with PlayStation Plus or Xbox games with Gold for that matter. I wonder if like adding this Animal Crossing DLC is maybe something that they would do going forward with other first party DLC or something like that. I would also remind everyone that you would very likely be getting Game Boy games at some point as well with this service. We know that emulator's there. It feels as though it's just a matter of time before they're added, and ultimately I think that would be part of the expansion pass and not part of just the original base price. Do you know what I mean? And I can see your face glinting here. No, I don't think it will go up when you put the Game Boy games on it, because I think that they are really pushing the cusp of what people will put up with right now, well, considering their online offering. So no, I don't think it will go up. So I wonder if they will add value to it in the same way that PlayStation and Xbox do, in some other way beyond these games. But as you said, Lewis, like, historically, these are some of the best video games ever made, you could argue, you know what I mean? And Nintendo are just giving you access to them indefinitely, basically, as long as you subscribe to the service, obviously. As you said, I don't really know how many of these games I will play. I'll probably only upgrade to the expansion pass service to get the N64 games when I eventually come around to paying them as well. So I think that we're probably in the same boat there. I've obviously been comfortable paying it's £18 a year. Do you know what I mean? I'm sorry, like I don't mean to sound snobby in any way, and if that is a lot of money to people, then I mean definitely don't be wasting it on bloody Nintendo Switch Online, I can tell you that. But to me, like that isn't a significant amount of money for me for the year. Do you know what I mean? So
no.
To pay that as a one-off payment, it's totally fine for me. Whereas if you're getting up into 35 quid, then you are sort of thinking, well, is this worth it, or am I quite happy with just that £18 for the year, you know? But yeah, definitely an interesting one, and it'll definitely be interesting to see if Nintendo do add further value, because obviously the Sega Mega Drive stuff, or the Genesis if you're in the United States, that was a bit of a surprise. So I don't know if maybe other Sega systems are on the cards as well. Like I have no idea, but it'll be really interesting to see what they continue to add to the expansion pass, because I don't think that it's going to sit stagnant, you know?
Let's hope not. Yeah, I think that'll be quite important to it all, but let's see how things pan out. I think it's maybe too early to go apocalyptic in the way that some people have. Absolutely.
Again, I'm not claiming that it's great value for money, but again, I'm basically fine with it. Alright, let's news item number 2. EA have announced that they could be cutting ties with FIFA and renaming its football series. Now, that is obviously insane and an incredibly huge announcement. FIFA, like it or not, is one of the biggest video game franchises in the world and the biggest sports game in the world. It has also emerged that prior to this statement by EA, they had filed multiple trademarks for EA Sports FC, which many are speculating could be the title of the new game, but that would be a rubbish title, so I really hope that it isn't that. Then also after that, so this is just a developing story that happened over the weeks that we were off, so it's quite nice to actually get all this out in one go, to be honest. It also emerged after that they had renewed again their long-term deal with FIFPro, which is the Football Players Union. David Jackson, the Vice President of EA Sports, has said this regarding the renewal.
Our players regularly remind us that one of the most important aspects of an EA Sports experience is the deep immersion created through authentic use of the world's greatest leagues, teams and talent. It's how we continue to uniquely blur the lines between the digital and physical worlds of football.
EA have also said, I think it was 2 weeks ago now, that the collective strength of EA football franchises is fueled by 300 plus licensed partners, including FIFPro, who help generate the game's unparalleled authenticity both now and long into the future. So it seems as though EA still have the licenses to the leagues, to the teams, to the players outside of their agreement with FIFA, which is very interesting because I thought that was all part of the same agreement with FIFA, basically. But EA still seem to have those licenses, which is very, very interesting, or will be very, very interesting moving forward. It has also come out this week that the reason for the EA FIFA rift is apparently because FIFA are demanding a doubled fee of $2.5 billion over the next decade. Now, while that sounds like a lot of money, and it definitely is a lot of money, $2.5 billion is a nonsense amount of money, but that is only $250 million per year for EA to have that FIFA license. Which, although that is also a colossal amount of money, considering that as of December 2020, EA have made more than $4 billion in FIFA Ultimate Team microtransactions alone, which is up 177% year on year, and it constitutes over a quarter of EA's net revenue. That seems like not very much money in the grand scheme of things, in the spectrum of the ludicrous amounts of money that EA make, you know? Although having said that, obviously, if EA can get all the licenses that they need and just drop the FIFA name, then I don't know, maybe 2.5 billion is too much. I don't really know. Like, the problem is that I have no idea obviously how these licensing agreement works, and I don't think that anyone outside of EA and FIFA probably knows how those licensing agreements work. But for me, that seems like FIFA might not be offering them all that much apart from their name for 2.5 billion, which is a lot, but yes, it's such a weird situation. It has also come out as well that apparently FIFA are looking to explore things like adding highlights from actual games into the FIFA video game, arena video game tournaments, which is something that I'm sort of surprised that they don't do already, and digital products like NFTs. which, that's just not nice at all, is it?
Not good.
No, certainly not. FIFA only a couple of days ago have made a statement themselves in which they said that they would be open to working with other developers. FIFA made this statement on their website.
FIFA will adopt a new commercial positioning in gaming and esports to ensure that it is best placed to make decisions that benefit all football stakeholders. FIFA is bullish and excited about the future in gaming and esports for football, and it is clear that this needs to be a space that is occupied by more than one party controlling all rights. Technology and mobile companies are now actively competing to be associated with FIFA, its platforms, and global tournaments. Consequently, FIFA is engaging with various industry players, including developers, investors and analysts, to build out a long-term view of the gaming, esports and interactive entertainment sector. The outcome will ensure that FIFA has a range of suitable parties with specialist capabilities to actively shape the best possible experiences and offerings for fans and consumers.
So, Lewis, this is absolutely wild. EA's FIFA games have been an absolute staple of the video games industry for our entire lives. I think, though, that this actually might be a good thing. Like, I think that football games and sports games in general, like, really need a bit of a shake-up, really. And I don't know, maybe this is the catalyst that starts something like that. It does also mean that the two biggest football games from when we were growing up, Pro Evolution Soccer and EA's FIFA, are now effectively gone. Although FIFA, I'm sure, will come back in some other reincarnation. Or maybe it just won't be called FIFA anymore. It will be called eSports FC or whatever the fuck it was. I mean, like, how do you feel about this? Do you think this is a good thing? Like, it's just so insane to me that, like, I can't remember when it was. I think that the first FIFA game came out in, like, 1993, so rapidly approaching 30 years that EA's FIFA games have been in all of our lives, and that will just be gone now.
Yeah, I mean, it is really big when you say it like that, and it's the kind of story that, you know, people might have seen floating around and think that'll never happen, but it has seemed to solidify and seems more and more likely that there is this rift here.
I think that FIFA statement says it all, doesn't it? I mean, they really seem to be like, oh no, this isn't a situation where one person, one developer should have all the rights. And I just thought that was very, very telling, that statement.
I think there's a few things going on here. I think one, EA's FIFA, they understand that they don't actually need the FIFA name or the World Cup license, which I think is basically what the deal with FIFA, the governing body, gives them. They don't need that to make a successful game. As long as they have put their marketing resources behind making sure players understand that what they're currently playing is FIFA 22, next year will be EA Sports Football Club 23 or whatever the hell they're going to call it. That is all of the work they really need to do, and I think otherwise that game will be very similar to what it always is. But the flip side here is that FIFA, the governing body, are in financial trouble in a lot of ways, despite it being the most lucrative sports product in the world. That's behind the drive, the real world drive to move towards a World Cup every 2 years, because they are losing money hand over fist. They could really, they see a commercial potential in doing that, and it feels to me like basically they've come to EA and said, we want double, and EA have gone, we actually don't really need you, and and that's where the standoff is. And it looks, from that last statement that I read there from FIFA, the governing body, it does seem a lot like they are now saying, well, actually we could probably license like a FIFA football manager game and a FIFA traditional sports sim game and a FIFA card game and a FIFA, you know, all a mobile game, on it goes. And they're maybe thinking, this is how we make our money now, and we don't just bang it all on EA paying us this every year. But I think that they might be taking a gamble with that, because the game, the FIFA game, sells like gangbusters every year, and that is a big source of income.
Exactly. Well, that's sort of my counterpoint to that, I suppose, is that the FIFA game, the name FIFA, for a lot of people might actually be more associated to the football game than the governing body. So therefore, that name carries a huge amount of weight, whether or not EA actually change their game very much, which I suspect they probably won't. I mean, I suspect it will probably be changed in name only, and it won't be called FIFA's Ultimate Team, it will just be called Ultimate Team. You know what I mean?
Exactly,
I think that's basically what EA are going to do. But having said that, and this is my hot take, right? So I think if anybody realistically is going to take on the FIFA license, because in reality, I don't think that there are too many people that could do it. I think the likes of PlayStation, Microsoft, Activision, Ubisoft all could do it, but I don't think that they actually have any interest in doing it. I think that a lot of the Japanese companies could probably do it. Square, Bandai Namco, Sega, I don't think that they have any interest in doing it. Obviously, Sega already have Football Manager. Konami already have eFootball, although we all know how that's going. Yeesh. In reality, I think that there's two options here. I think that Tencent get involved because obviously Tencent get involved, and therefore I think Epic are a bit of a dark horse. But I think that the real people that should take over for it in reality are 2K, because they already have a storied history with sports games. Not necessarily a good history with sports games, but they definitely do have a history with sports games. And I think FIFA 2K23 has a very foreboding ring to it, I will say. And I will also say that, see if a parent sees FIFA 2K24 or whatever it turns out to be on a shelf, I think a lot of them will pick that up before EA Sports FC 20 whatever. You know what I mean?
That is a fair point.
That's what I'm saying. That name carries a huge amount of weight, and I think that it would actually make a huge amount of sense for Take-Two. Anyway, Lewis, news item number 3. WB have revealed new cinematic trailers for Gotham Knights and Suicide Squad as part of their DC fandom event. Both games were announced back in August 2020. Still no hard release date on either of these games. As I said, these were both cinematic trailers as well. There was no gameplay at all. I'm sort of less worried about Suicide Squad because Suicide Squad was supposed to be coming out in 2022 anyway. However, Gotham Knights was supposed to be coming out this year, but was delayed until 2022. So the fact that we still don't have a release date for it, and 2022 is in reality just round the corner now, that is giving me warning lights, to be honest. That's becoming a little bit concerned, I think. It's also concerning because Warner Bros. Have also not released a AAA game, I would argue, since Mortal Kombat 11 in 2019. And I know that they've just released Back 4 Blood, but I would much more put that in the category of AA game than AAA game, certainly by WB's standards, I would say. Now, granted, they have supposed to be releasing 4 games in 2022, Gotham Knights, Suicide Squad, as well as the Hogwarts Legacy game and the Lego Star Wars Skywalker Saga game as well. Again, I really wouldn't be surprised if 2 of them didn't make it. Like that Harry Potter game and the Suicide Squad game, if they were pushed to 2023, would you be surprised?
Nope.
I don't think many people would be surprised.
Not one bit, no.
All this coupled with the fact that we know that the gaming division of Warner Brothers has been up for sale really not that long ago. Basically, I'm just getting a lot of bad vibes here. I don't feel good about either of these games. Although, having said that, did you watch the trailers?
Yeah, and
they were pretty good trailers. They were quite cool, you know what I mean? But they never told you anything about the game, you know?
Not massively,
and considering Gotham Knights particularly has been in people's hands, like we've seen a good amount of gameplay from that. The fact that it still doesn't have a release date, like what's going on there?
I mean, I'm not super alarmed by it. Like you say, like setting Suicide Squad off to one side, because I think they're probably still basically on track with that. It's coming when they're expecting it to come, I think, which will probably be in the latter half of next year. I would expect that Gotham Knights will release Q1 next year, probably around March, April time. There's a couple of things there. It might just be that they are waiting to announce that once the start of the year is a wee bit clearer, which, you know, we'll talk a wee bit about later on. But also, I could see that they might just well have the release date attached to that at a trailer at, say, the Game Awards or something like that. I think if by the end of this year we don't have a date for that, then yeah, it's not great. I mean, looking at it, I don't think they would have included the trailer for that at DC Fandom if it wasn't on track to release, right? Because you wouldn't talk about it this close to when it's supposed to be coming and have a kind of story trailer that we got there without being reasonably confident that something is okay with it, that it is actually coming. But I agree that it doesn't fill you with the same kind of excitement and confidence that like the Arkham games did when this thing that was supposed to be out a long time ago has been pushed. We're not being told much about it. I feel like there was some rumour or maybe even a confirmation at some point that the gameplay was being retooled a little bit. We've certainly spoke before about how, you know, that element of co-op play that both of these games are supposed to have is a bit of a red flag in some ways, that, you know, they often say things like you can play it single player, but it's actually a co-op or a multiplayer game. Never good.
If you can also play it single player, then it's a fucking multiplayer game. Yeah. Trust me. Almost every time.
You've got to think and hope really that they've looked at things like the Avengers game and that they are making sure, possibly even taking even longer than they intended to make sure it doesn't fall into the same pitfalls that has, and other games like it have, you know. So I'm kind of keeping my fingers crossed. I think that both trailers were good. Probably more interested in the Gotham Knights game, only because I'm more interested in Batman itself than I am in the wider DC stuff that Suicide Squad does, but keen to see a bit more of each, hopefully sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I'm just not sure, like, to your point that why would they show them off here if they didn't think they were going well? Like, would it have not been more glaring if they weren't there at all in a sort of similar vein? But
absolutely.
yeah, I guess we just sort of have to wait and see. My point is only that I don't get good vibes from WB, and I'm not really sure that's going to change very soon. Anyway, Lewis, news item number 4. Elden Ring has been delayed, but not by very long, thankfully. The game was due out in January the 21st and has been delayed a little over a month until February the 25th. As a side note, they have also announced that there will be a closed network test between the 12th and the 15th of November. Whatever the hell that is, it's basically a closed beta so far as I can work out. You can sign up for that before November the 1st for a chance to get your hands on the game early. I have already done that. I encourage everyone listening to this to do it as well, because why wouldn't you want to play that game early? But with the Elden Ring delay, we are looking at one hell of a start to 2022, Lewis. Jesus Christ, particularly February, I have to say. Obviously, if the game has to be delayed, that is absolutely fine. I'd much rather have a good game that the devs didn't have to break their backs working on, that's polished, rather than the opposite of all those things, you know. But listen to the list starting 2022. It is absolutely unreal. Starting in January, you've got Monster Hunter Rise coming to Windows, you've got Pokemon Legends Arceus, and then you've got Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Extraction, although I wouldn't be surprised at all if that Rainbow Six game ended up in February as well. Then in February, you've got the Life is Strange Remaster, Dying Light 2, King of Fighters 15, Horizon Forbidden West, Destiny 2, The Witch Queen, which is their big expansion. Then on the same day as that, Sifu also comes out, Elden Ring, of course, but on the same day as Elden Ring, the Saints Row reboot is supposed to be coming out. The Evil Dead game is also coming in February, and Vampire the Masquerade Swansong is in February as well. Then on in March, you have Gran Turismo 7, Triangle Strategy, Final Fantasy Origins, Tiny Tina's Wonderland, then GTA 5 and GTA Online are coming to the next gen. You've got Marvel's Midnight Suns coming as well, and WWE 2K22. Now, I understand that all of those games aren't for all gamers, and a lot of them aren't even for me, but I bet the vast majority of people listening to this podcast right now have heard at least 5 games there that they would like to play in the first 3 months of 2022, which is absolutely insane. I think that the reason for this basically is because of COVID delays, and all of these publishers and devs are trying to get their games out by the end of the financial year, which obviously starts again in April. But listen, fucking hell, man, that is like an unprecedented run of games releases, and I can think of 7 that I want to play, like definitely want to play, and ideally I would want to play more of them, and they all come out in 3 months. It's insane. Absolutely insane run of games.
It's an absolutely stacked beginning to 2022. I mean, obviously with the caveat that there's every chance some of them will move, whether because of, you know, genuine delays like we're seeing all the time anyway, and also I would think that certain games, looking at Saints Row in particular, may well choose to get out of the frying pan.
It's got to move. It's such a shame for them. You know, I mean, they had the date first, and then Elden Ring just went, do you know what? We'll have that date too. And you can't release on the same day as Elden Ring. You're going to get no buzz whatsoever. You know what I mean? They've got to move. It's such a shame for them.
Yeah, exactly. I think that some of these games are going to have to shift just to, like you say, it's not even about gamers' playtime necessarily. It's even about the press and media buzz cycle. It's like, can you actually be on the front page of any of these websites if you're going up against the new From Software game? I mean, really, you're going to struggle with that. So I think we'll see stuff move. I think we'll probably end up seeing some of them push into it later in the year, and there'll be some natural delays from the ravages of COVID that are still happening to game development cycles. But my God, I mean, you've not even talked there about the games that are coming up at the end of this year, even, that people will still be playing Halo by the time these games are releasing, you know what I mean?
Oh, definitely, man. To be honest with you, like, that was just the sort of big heavy hitters. Yeah, there's more games coming than that.
And there's others that we know are coming, or supposed to be coming in the first quarter of 2022 as well, that don't actually have release dates yet, but that would fall in that window. And, you know, some major games there as well. So it is absolutely crazy. Start booking your time off work now, everyone.
Yeah, I'll have from January the 1st until April the 1st off. Thank you very much. Even then, I'm not sure I'd have enough time to play them all. Anyway, let's finish off as we always do with a couple of shout outs. Shout out number 1, Metroid Dread has come out while we were away. just so everyone knows, we're definitely going to be covering a few things that have happened outside of this week whilst we were off, because frankly I want to talk about them and I make the notes. So Metroid Dread, good grief, does that game look fantastic, and the reviews definitely back that up, and I'm very, 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 very happy about that. Currently sitting with a very good score of 89 on Metacritic. They seem to have absolutely smashed it. What else is there to say? It's a clear Game of the Year contender at this point. I definitely want to play it by the end of the year, and I do have to give a shout out to Maddie Myers over at Polygon, who has done a fantastic article called Everything You Need to Know Before You Play Metroid Dread, which really does tell you everything you need to know about the series up until Metroid Dread. She's a huge fan of the Metroid series, and if you're someone that's new to the series, sort of like me and Lewis, although we have played Super Metroid and have sort of dabbled in the games, that is a fantastic reference point, I would say. Fantastic, and I will put a link to that in the show notes over at PlayersToo.com, definitely.
Yeah, super excited to get playing this one as well. I think it looks phenomenal. I've been seeing a lot of Twitch streams and little just like GIFs and clips from it on Twitter over the last couple of weeks since it released, and I think it just looks so good, so tense, really quite an intense looking experience. So I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully we'll get to it before the end of the year as well.
Alright, let's shout out number 2. Far Cry 6 has also come out while we were away, and that has been received less well, I will say. Currently sitting with a 75 on PlayStation, a 76 on PC, and an 80 on Series X, which is incredibly underwhelming for a game of the caliber of Far Cry, let's be honest here. I think that it basically is another Far Cry game, and I think that people are starting to get pretty fed up with the rinse and repeat nature of Ubisoft and the games that they are churning out right now. I think VGC put it best in their little blurb when they said, if you're interested in another Far Cry game that does Far Cry stuff the way it's been doing it for 10 years, you'll probably have a good time. But if you've already hit your limit with that kind of game, Far Cry 6 is ne plus ultra of an open world game design that is in bad need of revolution. And I just think, yes, they totally get it. That is it. Like, open world games have become so stagnant. I think Ubisoft has a huge responsibility in why they've become stagnant in the way that they are, quite frankly. But let's face it, pretty disappointing. And it's actually just been announced today that Ubisoft are apparently finally going to be working on a new Splinter Cell game, which should be really exciting. But at this point, like, do we really trust them to make anything other than something that's mediocre, you know?
Yeah, or something gimmicky, or that, you know, that is actually about money, income, rather than good gameplay. I mean, we've spoken about this plenty of times before. I don't have a lot of faith in Ubisoft anymore. It's been a while since I've played any Ubisoft games, actually, never mind their big AAA games. I mean, I think the thing here as well is that if you are just looking for big, dumb fun, Far Cry 6 probably is totally fine. Like, it'll be as good as the other Far Cry games, or the most recent ones at least, but I think that you are seeing reflected in that score that people are just a bit tired of it, and never mind just the actual gameplay, but also that constant cycle of, this is actually a political game, no it's not, the story and the gameplay and all those elements don't tie up very well by all accounts. You know, it's purporting to be a serious game, and then it has a sort of Tekken style chicken fighting mini game within it, you know, and you run about with an alligator, but you're supposed to be a revolutionary fighting you know, a real war and stuff. Just a lot going on there, and it's not for me.
No, it's not for me, and the Far Cry series hasn't been for me for quite a while, and I think a lot of people are finding out it's not really for them either anymore, to be honest. Alright, let's shout out number 3. Alan Wake Remaster also came out when we were away. It's currently sitting with 79 on the PlayStation 5 and an 80 on Series X, which is actually slightly less than the original game got of 83 back in the 360 days. But as opposed to Far Cry, I actually think that that's a sort of okay score for this game, basically. It seems that it's a fine remaster and that the core gameplay holds up by and large, though, let's be honest, it is an 11-year-old game that is launching in 2021, so that is probably reflected in the score, let's be honest. Ultimately, it is almost definitely the best way to play this game now, and I'm honestly still hoping to jump in at some point, and this will probably be the version I play.
Yeah, same here. I'm quite excited to get a shot of it at some point, and I'm quite glad to see that people responded well to it. So yeah, definitely looking forward to that.
And final shout out, number 4, Lewis. Back 4 Blood came out this week. It's currently sitting with a 76 on PlayStation 5, a 78 on PC, and a 76 on Series X, which I have to say is maybe a little underwhelming for its score, you know, which from a quick read through of a couple of reviews seems to be basically because of lack of polish, basically. But I will say that I have a group of friends that have played it, and they seem to be really, really enjoying it. So, while it might not be as good as those OG Left 4 Dead games were back in the day, I think if you're a fan, it will probably still scratch that itch, and it is available on Games Pass. So if you have an Xbox and you're interested, definitely go and check that out, because to be honest with you, it will probably be pretty good. It will be pretty good fun.
Yeah, not one for me, not something that's ever really been of interest to me, but I'm glad to hear that, you know, your pals are enjoying it. I'm sure I've got some shooter game playing pals who are going to get into it at some point, so I'll keep an ear out for that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Liz, I think it's time for a beer, and then we'll be back for Topic of the Week. And we are back for Topic of the Week. Topic of the Week this week is the important stuff we missed when we were away, Liz. And this basically centres around 3 topics. I will say that this is going to be much more conversational than our standard news items. This is going to be much more of a discussion, I will say. But the things that we really wanted to talk about were Bluepoint and how they have been bought by PlayStation. I think that came as a surprise to absolutely no one, because the PlayStation Japan Twitter account accidentally tweeted it when Housemarque were bought. Since then, obviously, the rumour mills have went absolutely wild about what Bluepoint has been working on and what they've been remaking. Pretty quickly, it revealed itself that they were working on a remake and an original game themselves, but the more recent rumours seem to suggest that will be Bloodborne, and they will be remastering, not remaking, the original game, and that there will also be a PC port of that. And they are also working on Bloodborne 2. PlayStation obviously own the Bloodborne IP, but to take on that project without Miyazaki's involvement, and as your first game as a solo dev, I mean, that is going to be quite something, I have to say. There will be lofty expectations on that game. The second thing that we wanted to talk about was that, according to VGC sources, Konami are set to revive the Metal Gear, Castlevania and Silent Hill franchises. Obviously, the rumours around Silent Hill in particular have been swirling for a long time now, but this is the first substantial news we have about Metal Gear, so far as I'm concerned anyway. We got it confirmed again that there are multiple Silent Hill games in the works, but apparently there is also a remake of Metal Gear Solid Snake Eater in the works from an external studio called Virtuous. And according to the sources, Konami also intend to release remasters of the original Metal Gear Solid games ahead of the remake as well. Apparently the remake is sort of early doors, so that'll be a bit down the line. Obviously, Konami are usually reluctant to let external devs use their IP, so I'm very glad to see that stance is softening, or hopefully softening. And thirdly, we also just wanted to talk a little bit about the Grand Theft Auto Trilogy remasters, which is called Grand Theft Auto The Trilogy, the Definitive Edition, which I just think is a cumbersome, terrible name. But regardless, this is the long-rumoured remasters of GTA 3, Vice City and San Andreas, which will be coming to current and last-gen consoles and PC. That also includes Switch as well. And apparently will also be coming even to iOS and Android in the first half of 2022. It is also a collection, which is fantastic, which means all 3 games will be together and not sold separately, which is something that I feared, I have to admit. But the flip side to that, of course, is that it looks as though it's going to be a full price sticker on this collection, which a lot of people seem to be annoyed about, but I thought that was totally reasonable. But Lewis, where would you like to start?
Well, yeah, a lot of different kind of areas there, but circling around kind of similar topics of remakes and remasters.
Remakes and remasters, man.
The return of some brilliant old games. I guess just quickly first on Bluepoint, I mean, like you say, I mean, it wasn't even the worst kept secret in gaming. It was just something that we'd already been told that we
literally knew.
Waiting for Sony to actually properly confirm. But a great purchase for Sony, obviously a fantastic studio to add to the PlayStation stable. I'm not putting any credibility at all on those Bloodborne rumours right now. I think that is wishful thinking on behalf of people who, well, 2 things. A lot of people have been clamouring for a remaster or a remake of Bloodborne, essentially a 60 FPS version of Bloodborne for quite a long time, and maybe they now see that this is a way to do it. And I guess it's all tied to Bluepoint doing Demon Souls, right? The idea is that if they've proven themselves with Demon Souls, then they can do Bloodborne. But I think, as you said, the idea of handing them a Bloodborne 2 unless it is in partnership with From Software in some way, which maybe it could be. There's no reason it couldn't be that.
Yeah, could be.
If that was the case, then maybe there's more reason to think it would happen. But I think to just hand them the IP and say, you can kind of match this game, this absolutely epoch-defining PlayStation 4 game, like, I just do not think that is a smart move, particularly for their first game as part of the studio and their first quote-unquote original game, because if it doesn't go well, the criticism would be vociferous, and I don't think Bluepoint need that.
No, to be clear, they did actually make a game in 2006, their very, very first game, but since then they have never made an original game. So if they were handed Bloodborne 2, that would be their first game since their first ever game, if that makes sense. So yeah, I mean, it would be a hell of a thing. I would love to see them work with From Software on it, though. I mean, if that is what they want to do, like, get Miyazaki involved, get him involved maybe from, like, a story perspective, from, like, a world-building perspective, like, I'd be totally happy with that, and then let Bluepoint deal with the actual mechanical nitty-gritty of it, for lack of a better term, because they nailed that feel in Demon Souls and whatever, so that's definitely something they can do. But I mean, look, I would love for this to be true. It's one of these things, I'll believe it when I see it,
Exactly, yeah. But great to have them on board.
Oh, totally. I mean, as far as them being a PlayStation studio, it makes a lot of sense, and they're a great studio. So, yeah, thumbs up from me, 100%. Metal Gear, though, Lewis. Metal Gear.
Well, I mean,
what do we think there?
That is the game that we've all been thinking and kind of hoping that Bluepoint would have been working on. So this news is kind of an interesting spin on all of that. It sounds like we're getting it. It sounds like there is actually some movement on the Metal Gear franchise at last, which is fantastic. Metal Gear Solid 3 is probably my favourite game in the series. Like, other than we've talked about all of this endlessly. Like, I think Metal Gear Solid 5's gameplay is the best, but MGS3 just has, I think, the sharpest story, and it's the thing that sets off the whole franchise and the direction that it goes in and all that. So I would love to see that come back, and I would, we talked a little bit about this off air, but I would like to hope that is the start of a process of remaking all of the games in their story chronology, rather than just kind of skipping 1 and 2, which would be a real shame if we never get those properly remastered or remade, sorry. But I don't know anything about Virtuous, I've got to say, so I don't really know what to expect from it.
I believe, I was looking this up a little bit today, I believe that they are more known for ports. It'll be interesting to see how they do this, because as far as I'm aware, they've not made a remake.
So, I mean, again, they're similarly to what we were saying with Bluepoint and Bloodborne. You don't want to set up a studio for failure by handing them something that is really beloved. But I don't want to cast any aspersions yet. We don't know anything about them, really. And
so this is from the VGC article. Apparently, they recently worked on Switch ports for the Dark Souls remaster, the Outer Worlds, and the BioShock collection, as well as contributing art and content to blockbusters such as Battlefield 1, Uncharted 4, and Horizon Zero Dawn. So, to me, they are a port studio for Switch and a
support studio, basically.
Studio, yeah, basically, yeah.
But I mean, I guess maybe that's the step up that you take as a studio. You've worked on some stuff, you've touched some big blockbuster games. You're not.
Here's Metal Gear Solid.
Well, that's insane. I mean, that's fairly insane when you say it like that. But just that idea of, like, you don't have to come up with the story and the gameplay and all of the incidents and the mechanics and all that. You are just taking something that exists and isn't that old and kind of reworking it and polishing it up. I mean, hopefully, like, Konami can put its weight behind that and, give them the Fox engine. I mean, do it that way, make it as kind of glittery and good as they can. I guess, hopefully, setting aside whether or not it totally works, hopefully this is a sign that Konami might be willing to give the franchise to some other companies down the line, maybe even to continue it at some point, because you've got to think ultimately Konami are going to continue the Metal Gear franchise, and I don't want them to do that with studios who aren't really up to it, and I don't want them to do it in the kind of Metal Gear Survive way that they tried before. Ultimately,
oh, sweet Jesus, no.
Yeah, it would be great if ultimately they took this as a sign that we can license out our IPs, and basically one of the big players comes along and takes that on in time.
Yeah, I've got to say, like, I'm not trying to be disparaging about this studio in any capacity. Like, you've got to start somewhere, but starting with Metal Gear Solid is
it's a big ask.
That's a hell of a start. It's a hell of a start. But yeah, I would say that I agree with you, actually. I actually think that the big news here is that Konami is open to letting external devs work on their IP. And for them, that is a big step. It's a step about 15 years too late.
Oh, yeah.
But it's a big step. So getting good external studios in to make the Silent Hill games, to make hopefully a new Metal Gear Solid game in the future, hopefully something half decent, and Castlevania as well, that getting a bit of a kick up the arse, which is again is another series that's maybe sort of lost its way in recent years.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know, like when a new Castlevania game comes out these days, is anyone really excited about it? Like, not really. I would like to see that sort of go back to its roots, and maybe someone can come in with like a really good pitch and can just take these franchises and elevate them back to where they were when they were huge, do you know what I mean? And sadly they've been allowed to lapse effectively, you know?
Yeah, totally. But it does seem like Konami are sort of essentially returning to the video game world as they once were, and that's great across the board.
Yeah, which is good. Yeah, definitely. And GTA, Lewis, GTA. Now, GTA 3, Vice City and San Andreas, I dare say that in their day they were among our favourite games ever. I think that they are among the 3 most important games ever. I would argue particularly GTA 3, which just wrote the rule book on how to do an open world, you know. Coming back in a remastered collection, I mean, in reality, what is your likelihood of playing these games?
I don't know. I mean, yeah, they were big games for us when we were younger, too young to be playing them, really. I haven't touched any of them for quite a long time. So for me, particularly 3 and Vice City are quite cloudy in my memory. And so I would actually quite like to go back and play those. I'm not going to lie and say that I'm absolutely champing at the bit. Like, I probably wouldn't buy this day one or whatever. But the thought of it being, of all 3 of these games being remastered with modern graphics, hopefully getting the kind of gameplay updates and the mechanical updates to make them feel a bit more like GTA 5. Obviously, they're not going to quite get there.
Well, I think that has recently come out, is that the controls are being updated to be more in line with GTA 5, which is definitely nice to see, because you don't want to feel like you're playing an old game. Exactly. You want to feel like you're playing a new game, you know, so that was good to see. What about the pricing? What do you think about it being full price for the collection?
I don't really get what the furore is around this either. I mean, any game that is going to cost like up to sort of £70, you know, it is going to make you pause. All full price PS5 games make me pause at the moment, because £70 is not something you easily chuck down. So I understand completely that people are kind of wary of it from that perspective, but they are 3 games. They are 3 fairly big games, really. I mean, San Andreas, obviously nowadays these games have been kind of eclipsed in scale by plenty of things, but when they were released, those games, particularly San Andreas, felt absolutely fucking enormous. And the idea that you're getting all 3 of them together, you're getting them remastered, you're getting them, I mean, it depends how well all this is done, right? But if they're properly remastered, if they look good and they play well, story-wise they're great. If they've managed to get even 60% of the licensed music and stuff that they had originally, all of that, I mean, you're talking there like 20 quid a game. If someone pitched that to you, if you said they were selling them separately but they're all £20, I think most people would think that that's pretty reasonable, again assuming that the remasters are done well, and I don't think we've got any reason to think that they won't be.
No, I don't think that we do at all. I suppose the thing that gives me pause is that these remasters will run on mobile phones, so that gives me a little bit of pause. But beyond that, these are long, in-depth games. Do you know what I mean? They're not as long as a modern game, but each of them, certainly San Andreas, that's got to be 30 plus hours. I would have thought Vice City must have been around that, and maybe GTA 3 is in the 20-30 hour mark, I would have thought. And I cannot tell you how long I spent playing San Andreas specifically, just dicking around for hours and hours and hours. It's just fun to be in these worlds.
Yeah,
do you know
absolutely.
what I mean? Like, again, I would argue that these are 3 of the best games ever made. I think that in a trilogy collection, if they play well, if they're remastered well, which again, I don't really think that we have any reason to doubt Rockstar, I think that's worth a full price title. Do you know what I mean? I think that that's the equivalent, you know? I don't think that I feel as if I'm getting done out of money there.
Absolutely. I mean, to compare it to something I've already mentioned on this show, which was the Mario 3D All-Stars collection, you know, a lot of people complained about that being the price that it was, and that basically Nintendo had done very little to those 3 games.
But they weren't 3 ports.
Exactly. And people complained about that, but if this is 3 similarly classic games, I mean, ultimately Mario Sunshine isn't really even held up that well within that franchise, but you're talking about 3 game-changing games, and some of the best games in that franchise ever, and some of the best games ever made, really. It's huge hits on the PS2 era, I just don't really think it's a big complaint there. I can get that some people, they've been playing GTA 5 for a long time. They've given Rockstar a lot of money. Fair enough. Like, a full price game is a lot of money, and people have every right to say that it's not worth it to them. But I'm not surprised that it's going to cost that much. I don't think it's that much to ask. It's not going to nickel and dime you with microtransactions and all that stuff. You're just getting 3 solid, really good games, hopefully done really well. And I think that that's probably worth full price.
Could not agree more. Couldn't have said it better myself, Liz. Anyway, I think that we'll have to call it a day there. Thank you very much for indulging us and let us talk about news that we were excited about, but just happens to be a little bit older than what we would normally talk about. It has been fun. Very, very glad to be back, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to remind everyone that you can find PlayersToo on all the social media. That's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayersToo.com. That's PlayerStoo.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, that really, really, really helps us out. I know I say it twice a week, every week, but it does not become less important on a weekly basis. And if you could leave us a little review as well, again, that just helps us out even more, and you would be an absolute legend to us. I'd like to remind everyone that our play-along games for this month are Little Nightmares and Little Nightmares 2, because we totally fucked it up at the start of this month, so now we're doing 2 at the end of this month. I've actually now completed both of them, Liz. I am ahead of schedule.
Nice one.
Which is very rare.
Yeah. Yeah, I've beaten Little Nightmares, but I've got Little Nightmares 2 installed and ready to go. I'm just going to do what I did with the first game, which was kind of play an hour each night and just do it over a couple of days, because I thought that was a really nice way to experience the first game. Yeah,
I basically did it in a couple of sessions, each game in a couple of sessions as well, and I'm very excited to talk about them as well. I will hold my tongue until then.
Yeah.
Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, we will see you next week.
Thanks.